The winter in this part of Japan was brutal. A poor farmer was walking home along a river, completely frozen over, his fields buried under heavy snow. He was hungry, with barely enough rice at home to last the week. Passing a frosty thicket, he heard a desperate rustling sound. Inside was a wounded crane, pierced by a stray arrow. His first instinct was immediate survival. Here was an easy catch, a bird large enough to boil in a pot and keep his stomach full for days. But seeing the creature up close, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He pushed his own hunger aside, reached into the freezing brush, pulled the shaft from the bird's side, and carefully rubbed a soothing balm into the wound. The moment he let go, the crane spread its enormous wings and soared back into the freezing sky. The farmer was still hungry, but his conscience was clear. In an environment where every single meal is a question of survival, giving up a guaranteed catch to save a dying animal is an act of radical self-denial. He had chosen mercy over his own life. He went back to his empty shack, ate half a bowl of rice, and tried to sleep. But in the early hours of the morning, a sharp tapping echoed through the dark. He crept to the door clutching a heavy knife, bracing for a robber or a hungry predator. Instead, standing alone in the moonlight was a beautiful young woman. He let her in out of the storm. 3 days later, he found the courage to ask her to marry him. She agreed immediately, and for a brief time, his desperate loneliness vanished. But the winter dragged on, and their rice supply dwindled to nothing. They had no money left and nothing of value to sell. Affection alone couldn't keep them from starving. Even a miracle has its limits. The farmer had found a companion, but their bowls were still empty, and the frost was still creeping through the walls. Seeing his despair, his new wife offered a strange solution. She told him she would weave a cloth for him to sell, but on one strict condition. She must work in the back room, and he must never, under any circumstances, open the door. He agreed. But since they owned no thread, he sat outside the door for hours, listening to the rhythmic clatter of a loom, wondering how she could possibly be making anything at all. When she finally emerged, she handed him a heavy, luminous fabric. It was covered in vibrant floral patterns and drifting clouds, woven with a level of detail fit for a royal court. The farmer took the fabric to the local market and sold it for an absolute fortune. In a single afternoon, he made enough money to comfortably survive several winters. Their survival now hinged entirely on a blind agreement. His willingness to respect an unexplained boundary directly translated into the wealth keeping them alive. But comfort breeds complacency. The farmer quickly forgot the discipline that got him through freezing months and began buying whatever he wanted, paying exorbitant prices without a thought. This chart maps out his sudden fortune. You can see the massive spike in his wealth after the sale. But almost immediately, the line curves sharply downward as his impulsive spending drains their reserves. Before the snow even begins to melt, the money is gone. They are thrust right back into the very same poverty they started in, with the deadly cold closing in once again. Once again, his wife retreated to the back room to save them. But this time, as the farmer listened to the wooden machinery clacking from the other side of the wall, his gratitude faded. It was replaced by an intense, consuming need to know her secret. The farmer spent his days listening to the rhythmic clatter from behind the door, his mind looping over the same questions. Where did the thread come from, and who exactly was the woman he had married? Unable to sit with the mystery any longer, the farmer broke his promise. He crept up to the wooden frame, slowly lifted the latch, and peeked through a crack in the door. His wife was nowhere to be found. Instead, standing over the machinery was the exact same crane he had pulled the arrow from in the thicket. The intricate pattern on the floor wasn't made of thread. The bird was painstakingly plucking her own plumage, tearing out the soft feathers from her breast to feed the machine. The beautiful embroidery he sold for gold was actually composed of her own body. To keep him in comfort, she was systematically plucking herself bare, one feather at a time. The bird suddenly looked up and locked eyes with him through the crack. She let out a sharp cry, shedding a single tear as she realized her secret was exposed and the trust was irreparably broken. In an instant, she frantically beat her wings, launching herself up through the cottage's smoke hole and vanishing into the winter sky forever. The farmer had enough wealth from the second cloth to keep his body alive, but he never married again. He spent the rest of his days entirely alone in the house by the river. True devotion requires a space that remains unquestioned. When the farmer violated that boundary to see how the magic worked, he ensured that it could never exist again.